am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born there.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born there.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
You're born there, you're born there.
Tell them that we born there.
You're born there, you're born there. I am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born there.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born there.
You're born there, you're born there. I am a true born Belizean.
Tell them that we born there.
Belize my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born there.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born there.
I am proud.
Good night, listeners and viewers of the Navel String Connection show. Thank you for tuning in tonight. It's a very important discussion. While we normally have our show that focuses on the Belize diaspora, tonight we have two attorneys from the United States. And before we get there, this is Navel String Connection, your host, ARIA Lightfoot. Bilal Morris should be signing in shortly. For our guests tonight, we have Rishma Eckert and Devon King, both with Belizean and Guyanese background, Caribbean background. And also the show is produced by XTV. Our producer is Noor Mohammed. So thank you for joining us. And this is a very important show because I've been following some of the threads and stuff like that regarding immigration. And there's a lot of scared, people are scared. A lot of people are confused about immigration right now. Today, the President of the United States gave an interview that basically said that anybody who enters the country undocumented will be treated as a criminal, meaning that not only will, according to the president, not only will violent criminals, but everybody who is undocumented will be a target. And with that being said, we have Devon King, who is an immigration attorney in New York, and he has fought immigration laws, or not fought it, but try to fight to upkeep the laws and to protect people's rights. He's also an attorney in Grenada and Trinidad, I believe. And we also have Rishma Eckert. She's a business attorney. She's very involved with the Belize diaspora, one of the co-organizers of the Belize Diaspora Summit. And so welcome, guys. And first, Devon, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Aria. Thank you for having me. I'm Devon King. I'm an immigration attorney, admitted to practice in Guyana and Trinidad. Yes. Good night.
Thank you. And Rishma, could you just give a little bit of introduction?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rishma Eckert. I am Belizean and Guyanese. I practice business law in Florida, and thank you for having us.
All right. So your phone must be ringing off the hook right now, Devon, I would assume, right?
Yes.
Because you come from a community where we have a lot of people from the Caribbean. As you could see, there's a list that was circulating with different countries that are on removal order right now. Belize number was pretty high for such a small population of only 400,000. Belize had 899. Jamaica, I believe, had a very high number. Countries like Guatemala, that's close to Belize, very high. I think they were like 250,000 people. So with that being said, could you tell us a little bit about what's happening right now? What's a removal order so people can understand at least that term?
Okay, so firstly, a removal order is an order for you to be removed from the United States, as the name implies. It can originate from Homeland Security, specifically Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, as people commonly call it, or it can also originate from an immigration judge. So those are the two kinds that you will see. And it's basically, as the name implies, an order that you be removed from the United States.
So who would normally, because I think what's happening right now is that they are enforcing these removal orders when before I believe they weren't as aggressive with the removal order. I think that's what's happening is that the media now is making this a big issue and they're focusing on removal orders. Who is normally at risk for a removal order?
Well, persons who've already been ordered removed and have a final order of removal. So that means if there is a period for appeal, usually 30 days, if it's an order of removal from an immigration judge, and that period has expired, or you've exhausted all appeal measures and, without the order being overturned, then the order becomes final and it can be executed by ICE at any time.
Okay. And based on your experience as an attorney, what was it like before? Like, how long does it normally take for that appeal process, everything to go through, and for you to be eventually removed? How long does that normally take?
So I have a saying that I tell clients sometimes, well, at least during prior administrations, that time is your best friend. Whenever you have a case that things don't look too positive about it, time can oftentimes be your best friend. So it would usually take a number of years sometimes when a person files an appeal to when the appeal has been fully ventilated. And within that time, sometimes the circumstances change, the laws change in their favor, and we may be able to keep them here ultimately. Sometimes it's a matter of them having a child that turns 21, a U.S. citizen child who turns 21 and then can now file for them, and they were able to remain in the United States during that appellate period. So before, it could take a number of years. Now, however, with Trump just now getting into office, and you can see the aggression with which they're trying to carry out enforcement. I haven't seen exactly as yet, but I expect that things will move a lot faster.
Because I think he is trying to remove the entire appeal process. I think from what I was following, he's trying to where if you've been deemed as undocumented, they can just automatically remove you. That I don't know if it's in practice right now, but does an undocumented immigrant have any rights under the U.S. law currently as it stands?
Okay, so that's a very broad question. And first, addressing what you said at the beginning, removing the rights to appeal and so forth. So when you're talking about an appeal, you're talking about appealing a decision that's coming from a body, whether it's USCIS or the immigration court, right? The right to appeal is entrenched in law, right? Those laws have not been changed. So if the right to appeal exists from a certain decision, undocumented immigrants who've received an unfavorable decision have the right to appeal. As far as the latter part of your question relating to the rights of undocumented immigrants, I think what you're alluding to is something that came out recently, a new executive order that expanded DHS's powers as far as expedited removal goes. And this means their ability to detain you and deport you without you seeing a judge. And I think that's what you're probably getting to, your right to see a judge, essentially. Now, previously, expedited removal applied in cases where, say, someone is coming into the United States and they present false documents at the airport, all right? If you've been found to have done so, you would be subjected to expedited removal. You can just be put on a plane and sent back to your country of origin. Also, it could happen in instances where a person comes into the United States across the border illegally. They are caught within a certain distance of the border. Within 14 days, those persons are subject to expedited removal. What they did recently is to expand the scope of authority that they have to carry out expedited removal. And they've expanded it to the point of, as long as you've crossed the border unlawfully, whether by land or sea, and you're caught within 2 years of being here, or they don't believe you've been here for 2 years, as the order states, you are subjected to expedited removal. The burden would be on you to prove that you have been here for more than 2 years.
Okay.
The law provides for it. It has been there before, but has never before been enforced in this way. So that's what's happening now.
I have a procedural question for Devon. When you talk about removal orders, just for clarification, are these orders pursuant to standing before a judge and talking to a judge, or is this removal order done by USCIS? Like, does a person get their day in court before they get a removal order?
Well, removal orders can be issued in different circumstances. USCIS doesn't issue them. USCIS does fall under Homeland Security, but they don't issue the removal orders. ICE would issue the removal orders. Again, another sister agency on the DHS. The removal orders can come, as you were describing earlier, in the form of you've had a full hearing before a judge. The judge has found you removable and that you don't qualify for relief or denied your application for relief, and you've been ordered removed. So it can happen in that context. It can also happen in the form of, if you fail to show up for court, you can be ordered removed in your absence.
Okay.
So, and that, you certainly don't want that to happen, because it even restricts you from getting future relief down the road if you were to do that. Or you could be ordered removed. Like I said, you're coming into the country with fraudulent documents. ICE does their due diligence, determines that your documents are fake, and you're subject to expedited removal. And that kind of removal is also an order of removal.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The reason I ask is because a lot of the questions that I get are people who have sort of flown under the radar for a very long time, and their idea of what's happening is that at any minute now, if there's an ICE agent, they're going to see you here, they're going to ask for your documents, and immediately have a removal order. That's why I was asking about procedure, because that's the fear, is that, let's say your neighbor knows that you're not here legally, and they call ICE, and ICE can go to your house and just immediately have an order. So that's why I was asking about the procedure. Yeah. Do you get your day in court? Do you get to plead your case? Or is it just a matter of creating an order?
No, it's not a matter of just creating an order, but an order could have been issued without your knowledge. I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, you were sent a notice to appear before an immigration judge, but you never received it, or you moved. It went to the address, the old address. So in that instance, you would have ended up missing court. And then when you miss court, the order is issued in your absence. You come to an immigration attorney, hey, I just got married, this is my wife, or this is my husband, and I want to file for my green card and so forth. Oh, have you had any interaction with immigration in the past? Well, yes, they did speak to me when I first came in or so on, but nothing ever happened. I never received anything in the mail. Okay, I think I should do a Freedom of Information request on you. You do the check, you see here it is, the person has an administrative file with immigration, and there's an order of removal in it for them in their absence. They didn't even know that it existed. So there are people who could have that knock on the door indeed, and it's about detain and deport, and they didn't even know that all of that happened in their absence.
So it's possible that all those numbers of the charts that we've seen with people who are on that, deportation list, they probably don't even know that they have orders of removal. I mean, some may know, but there's a possibility that many don't even know.
Correct.
Interesting.
But what's important to know, though, is even people in those situations, there could be something that could be done. There's something that could be done in the form of filing a motion to reopen those proceedings because you didn't have notice of the hearing, or you couldn't attend for reasons beyond your circumstances beyond your control. So nothing is ever as clear cut in immigration. Certainly, if you find yourself in that situation, you should reach out to an immigration attorney and find out what your specific options would be.
I concur. And marrying a U.S. citizen is not always the fix-it, right?
No,
for
it's
everything.
not always the fix-it. It's not always.
I do have constitutional questions, right? Under the U.S. Constitution, the idea is that you're protected in the United States once you're in the United States under unreasonable searches. And also, my question is really, there has been instances already where people are being profiled. People who are legally U.S. citizens. I recently heard about a case where this mother and daughter were in Wisconsin. They were speaking Spanish. Somebody profiled them. They detained them, took them to immigration center only to find out that they were actual U.S. citizens. So my question is, because I've heard, and I just want this to be, being that this is your expertise, I've heard that if an immigration officer approaches you or knocks on your door, you're not required to open if they don't have a warrant. Also, you do not have to answer any questions that you're being asked. Is that true? And if you don't answer, what are some of the repercussions?
Okay, so yes, what you're saying is true, that even undocumented immigrants have certain constitutional rights here in the United States. And indeed, if an ICE agent knocks on your door, you don't have to open the door unless the agent has a warrant that is signed by a judge. If it is a ICE detention warrant, meaning a warrant just to come and take you into custody, that doesn't allow them to enter your home unless you give them permission to do so. So you don't have to open your door. If they tell you they have a warrant, then ask them to slide it under the door or hold it up to the window. And when you look at the warrant, you want to make sure your name is correctly spelled on it, the address is correct, you're looking for the judge's signature on the warrant. And again, you do all of this through the door or window. You don't have to open your door. And also, you don't have to speak with them. You do have the right to remain silent. An ICE officer will commonly ask you where you were born or how you got into the United States. Now, it's their burden to prove that you're deportable or removable from the United States. And you don't have to help them do their jobs. You can tell them, I know I have a right to remain silent, and say out loud that I'm exercising my right to remain silent. Also, you can ask to speak with an attorney. You have a right to an attorney. You should have your attorney's number on standby. Or even if you don't have an attorney, ask them for a list of pro bono attorneys. They have them on hand. They will give them to you, and call an attorney. You can even ask to speak to your consulate, and your consulate can arrange for you to get in touch with an attorney. So you don't have to sign anything also that they provide you with, or if you're going to sign it, make sure you understand clearly what it is. That being said, if you choose, for instance, to remain silent, you don't say anything, and you still get taken into custody, all right? They could still prove through documents that you are a foreign national, all right? And then it would be up to the judge to determine, the immigration judge, whether you are in fact removable from the United States, whether the government has met its burden, and then you have to defend yourself in removal proceedings, all right? So a lot of this could still come down to you end up being detained and still ending up in ICE custody and facing removal. But the gist of it is to not make their jobs easy for them. And within your right as well, within the parameters of the law. Don't run from them, surely. It's pointless. Don't do that. Also, you don't know, for instance, if you may end up in a situation where you have a bond hearing, and if you're entitled to bond and you have a bond hearing, and the fact that you ran comes up as an issue that you're a flight risk, do not, under any circumstances, provide them with any false documents, any false IDs or anything of that sort, and do not claim that you're a United States citizen. That is what we call the kiss of death in immigration law. Don't ever do that. There's no waiver for something like that. It's very exceptional circumstances under which you can overcome something like that. It's.
So what happens with this? Because I feel like who are going to be most at risk are mothers, single mothers. What happened to a mother who has American children? What protection does the state provide if that mother doesn't have family members nearby? So I heard about a case of a mother, she has 3 American kids, and she is on removal order. But their babies, I think the oldest is like 5, 3, and 2. How does the state normally deal with that? And has the current administration thought about how they're going to deal with these dynamic family members where children are involved, but they're U.S. citizens? What kind of a mother or a father too, who is single and is taking care of their children, what can be done in those cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think that same example that you give applies even in homes where they're both mothers and fathers, where say both mother and father are here undocumented and they have U.S. citizen children. What thought, you asked, has been put into it? I don't know. Honestly, I can't say. Because it's a very valid question. Much of the changes that are happening now, as an immigration attorney, I'll tell you this, we're really yet to see it play out in real life. You hear things are happening and so on. But I think what is lacking in a lot of the policies and the orders that are coming out is, like you said, the word thought, as far as how practical, realistic are these ideas and these policies. The border czar answered that question that you asked many times in the media by stating that the kids go back with them, right? That honestly, that starts to open up a bunch of floodgates, all right? Without us getting too much involved in that starts to open a whole lot of floodgates, because it's sort of making U.S. citizenship worthless at some point.
Well, that's why they paired it with birthright citizenship.
Yeah,
that's why they paired it.
It's starting to make it worthless, So it's more urgent for an undocumented mother, even if she has no criminal history, to be removed from the United States than for U.S. citizen children to remain here.
Okay.
All right? So this stuff, a lot of it, we have to be human beings first. You know, we have to have some sense of civility and humanity. And a lot of what we've been hearing from the 20th of January onward has just been black letter stuff that you can write on paper, but when you think about how it really applies in life, a lot of it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So as I sit here, honestly, I don't know how to answer your question. We just have to see how a lot of this will play out. And there was a time when, not too long ago, I would dare to say, no, that just doesn't make sense. I don't see how they would do that, right?
Because they can't legally deport a U.S. child.
No, but what would happen is they would effectively do it, you know, because now when the mother is gone and there's no one else to take care of the child, then what's essentially going to happen?
Or put the child in foster care, in child services or something like that.
Yeah, greetings, guys. I heard a report on National Public Radio today where is this couple, a Mexican girl came here when she was 3 and a Thailandese husband, and they have a child born in Chicago with that whole Chicago raid. And so the reporter was trying to get to the audience to let them understand that here you have a case where you have 2 undocumented and they're what they call it, DAPA? DAPA recipients, and they have this child in the middle that was born. And you could hear the concern. The girl is like, I don't know anything else about anywhere else but Chicago. And so was the husband. But they are questionable about what they will do when ICE comes to them and what will happen to their child. But they have made up their mind that the child will come with them.
But where are they going? They're from different countries.
Mexico, right? They're going to the girl's country.
Okay.
And she talked about her whole coming to the United States illegally, coming through that whole situation there. And the husband is a Thailandese from Thailand. But they are already making plans that they know it will happen and that they will take their child with them. Would that be an option for most cases, Devon King? Would you say that would be a better choice than to leave a child in the United States?
That is always an option. The United States doesn't stop anyone from leaving the country. That's the easiest thing to do, is to leave the United States. So that's always an option. In fact, whether or not they do that, it's really going to come down to a personal choice. You know, each family will have to determine what makes sense for them, you know. But the point I'm making ultimately is it's very difficult to see all of this, how it will materialize, you know, like how will this all play out, you know, and what's scary is that you thought before, you thought certain things, no, we would just never go there, right? But here we are.
Yeah.
And then certain things are being mentioned, and you really now have to take it seriously, you know? But on a daily basis, as an immigration attorney, I just try to grasp with what is directly in front of me, what we're dealing with currently, and how it's going to affect the people I represent and the people who come to me. I can't worry too much about the evolution of all of this. I just have to deal with specifically, you know, what's in front of me.
That's right. And the shining beacon of hope right now is the judiciary in the U.S., because even with like the birthright citizenship issue, as soon as it went to court, it got shut down. So, yeah. You know, you can sign, I guess you can say and sign anything, but at the end of the day, when it becomes tested, like Devon is saying, when it becomes tested and there's an evolution, there will be a challenge in the court for certain things. There will be case law provided. So we're going to have a clearer direction as this continues on.
I guess Bilal brought up a very interesting thing, but I see the potential for abuse in this, Devon. If you're undocumented and you're with a U.S. citizen spouse, they can always use the law, especially in custody cases, divorce cases, whether or not the wife would have any rights, who represent. I know in New York specifically, New York provides legal representation for a child during a divorce. But do you think, and I'm just asking because I don't know, do you think that in these immigration cases, children should have a legal advocate that's separate from their parents? Because there has to be a balance, you know what I mean? And then what happens when the parents are from different countries, and the child is a US citizen? How do you work that out? How do you decide where the child goes, especially in cases where there's custody battle? I mean, I'm just seeing 5 million scenarios being created by something that was never resolved. I think they allowed it to get out of hand. But one of the things, Devon, I want to ask you this, because to me, they're going after people, but what happens to all these corporations that hire undocumented workers so that they do not have to pay you a salary? Is the government obligated also to hold them accountable? Because if there was no work to come to, they wouldn't come. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, just from a legal perspective regarding hiring of undocumented workers.
Well, the corporations can be deported, so it's not going to be like they'll face immigration consequences per se. But we would expect some kind of civil enforcement against them, fines and so forth. I imagine that's what will happen. To your earlier point about the children and them having representation in immigration proceedings, the framework of an immigration court proceedings and family court proceedings, they're different, right? In the immigration court setting, the child would not be separate and apart from their parents. So if the parents are in removal proceedings and the child is also removable and in proceedings with the parent, it's commonly going to be that the attorney who represents the parents are going to represent the child, and because their interests are aligned. In a family court setting, there is the separate, independent issue of best interests of the child that is separate and apart from the interests of the mother and the interests of the father. So in that setting, it would allow for an independent attorney for the child. So it's a different setting altogether. In a context, I believe you were alluding to, where, say, for instance, the parents are in removal and the child is not, and then you want to have some kind of legal protection for the child, separate from the parent, it wouldn't be entertained in immigration court because the child is not in removal proceedings. The only thing the immigration court is dealing with is whoever is being charged as being removable, are they removable? And should they be ordered removed? If the child isn't included in that, then there's no need to hear the child or hear an attorney on behalf of the child. Mm-hmm. So because of the different dynamics there, what you were mentioning wouldn't be too practical.
Right.
I have a lot of situations where I'm a teacher in the classroom and you could see the fear. I teach predominantly Latino classrooms, and a lot of these children are undocumented. They barely speak English, for some of them. And you can see the fear and the concern in them that they could be removed from a classroom by ICE. And you could see where these educators are putting up as much resistance. I mean, the classrooms are filled. Our classrooms are filled with these slogans, and ever since, in the protection of the minority and the undocumented. But ever since President Trump issued that deportation order, you could see the trauma that has been inflicted on these kids, that they are working, but at the same time, they're scared, because a lot of their parents, may be that some of them are even born here. A lot of their parents are undocumented. What procedure would ICE take in the case of entering schools? Because I've seen certain reports in Chicago where they tried to do that and they were resisted. And in that case, what kind of legal, I know you broke down already the legal aspects of the child born in America and the two parents undocumented or whatever, but what it is for undocumented children who are in these schools, how would an attorney or the law protect them in any case, or is there any kind of protection for them?
Yeah, well, I've heard that they've curbed that measure, whether their intention to enforce immigration laws at the schools, at churches, and so forth, because of course there was somewhat of an uprising about that. I have to read on it more as to see in what way they've toned that down. But I've seen on the news, for instance, here in New York, that the schools, the staff, the principals have taken a position that they will not allow ICE officers to come into a school and to do that. And they've reached this position after corresponding with their counsel, because they also have a right to protect the children. They have a responsibility to protect the children that are in their care during the school hours. And to allow agents to come through a school, they may or may not have weapons on them, the kind of panic that can create, that environment would certainly be disruptive, to say the least, for children. And it is in that vein that the principals and the teachers and so on have said, look, we're not going to allow this to happen. If you want to enforce your immigration laws, then do it elsewhere, but don't come into a school filled with children, some of whom have nothing to do with what you're here about, and you can potentially put them in jeopardy and harm them. So, because, you're not just talking about physical harm, you're talking about emotional trauma to children, So, ICE has a lot of plans, but as you can clearly tell from what we spoke about earlier, about knowing your rights if they come to your home or your workplace, your right to remain silent, etc., right? There are certain limitations as to how far it can go, all right? So, and that's an example too. So they do rely a great deal on cooperation, even from local law enforcement. There was a time when if someone was in criminal custody in a sanctuary city like here in New York, and they came up on ICE's radar, for lack of a better term, and ICE goes to the detention facility, the criminal detention facility that they're being held at, and leaves a detainer with that facility that, hey, when this person is due to be released, we will come and get them, and we'll do so within 48 hours. There was a time when those detainers were honored, and then states just stopped honoring them because they're like, look, we're not going to keep anyone here for longer than we need to, because we're not obligated to do it. And then sanctuary cities stopped doing it. And a lot of people would go in and out of criminal custody and not encounter ICE. So as I was mentioning earlier, they do rely a great deal on cooperation from the state agencies.
When it comes to, I heard that if you enter the United States undocumented, you cannot adjust your status to legal ever. even if you marry a US citizen, even if you do a lot of stuff. Is that true?
It's not it's true when you use the language, you cannot adjust your status, but it's true to an extent. So generally speaking, in order for you to adjust your status in the United States, meaning, you're in one status, you're changing to another, and you're doing it here, right? That's why it's called adjustment of status, because it's happening here in the United States. You should be in status, or must be in status. That's the general rule. If you're out of status, there are exceptions that could apply that would allow you to adjust status. For instance, if you are adjusting based on an immediate relative filing for you, and that would be if you have a U.S. citizen spouse filing for you, a U.S. citizen child who's 21 or older, or if you're the parent, if you are a U.S. citizen child who's below 21 being filed for, or if you are a parent of a U.S. citizen child who's 21 or older that's filing for you, all right? These are exceptions which you would be able to adjust your status here.
Even if you came in undocumented? Even if
and I'll get to that too.
Okay.
There is another exception that they call grandfathering or 245I, right? So if you've been here prior to December 2001, prior to December 2000, and someone had filed a visa petition on your behalf prior to April 30th, 2001, which is called the sunset date, an approvable filing, you would be able to adjust your status, yes, based on that old filing. You would be grandfathered. And that applies even if you came into the United States unlawfully.
Okay.
All right? But not a lot of people do qualify for that. Some people don't even know that they qualify for it, because this is another way in which it could apply to you and you don't even know. Say, for instance, someone didn't file for you, but say they filed for your parent, and you were entitled to be a derivative of your parent. All right? That's another way that you could be grandfathered. And even though you came into the United States unlawfully, you would be able to remain here and adjust your status. Now, for those who those things don't apply to, you came in unlawfully, and you're right, even if you marry a citizen, you came in unlawfully and grandfathering doesn't apply to you, you won't be able to adjust status. You would have to do what we call visa processing, consular processing. That's the process where you'll get your immigrant visa and your interview at the embassy in your home country, or the one designated for your home country. And it goes on as if you were outside of the United States, and that's where you were waiting for your visa. However, a key component, a crucial component for that is before you leave the US to return to your home country to do that visa interview, you need a waiver, provisional waiver of unlawful presence. All right? You need to have that in hand, approved, before you depart the US to go to an interview. Otherwise, you could be barred from coming back to the US anywhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on how long you were here unlawfully. And to get that waiver, you need to prove extreme hardship to either a US citizen or a green card holder, spouse or parent. So now that's another thing you have to consider. Do you have these qualifying relatives in your life who you can show hardship to? If you don't have a US citizen or green card holder, spouse or parent, you will not qualify to pursue that waiver. you will not, therefore, we won't be able to take advantage of the filing that your family member did for you. You will go out and return safely. Another exception to if you came into the United States unlawfully and you want to get your green card here would be if you're pursuing a green card based on a battered spouse petition. That's another common way that people can overcome that. So that's if you've been married to a US citizen or a green card holder spouse and you were subjected to extreme cruelty or battery. It can also apply in instances where your child who's been abused by a parent or a parent who's been abused by a child of yours. So there are ways around it. It's always best, of course, to speak to an immigration attorney and know specifically what applies to you.
For the waiver, Devon, is are U.S. citizen children not a qualifying relationship?
Unfortunately, no,
It's
not
not?
for that waiver, not for that waiver, not for
Wow,
that.
that's
simple waiver.
crazy. So
Yeah, but
you're taking care
here's
of
the
all
thing,
your
though.
kids?
Here's the thing. A skilled immigration attorney will nevertheless, right? So first things first is you need to have the qualifying relative. You need to have the qualifying relative to apply for the waiver, because if you don't have the qualifying relative, on the face of it, you're ineligible for the waiver. Once you have the qualifying relative, though, and I've done this countless times, any hardship to the child, I use that as hardship to the parent as well, because a child's hardship is their parent's hardship, you know? So you piggyback off of whatever may be the case with it. Because if this, let's say, for instance, the child has autism, then now that enhances the hardship to the parent who's now left to care for the autistic child on their own. So once you have the qualifying relative, though, everything
You can kind of work things in.
Everything opens up, yeah.
Interesting.
What about people who are seeking asylum? You know, in some of our Caribbean nations, we have serious issues with gangs, and sometimes people's life are at risk. And recently I heard that the people who have even been already approved for asylum, they are rescinding those approval. But the US is also a member of the United Nations, and how does that play in? Like now are they in limbo right now? What's happening to people who are expecting to get asylum?
Okay. Well, I haven't heard of instances where persons who've been granted asylum have had it rescinded. I have recently heard of cases where the immigration judge has granted asylum, even a case that I recently did, and the government has appealed the judge's decision. You know, you see the government appealing the judge's decision when the judge grants relief to the undocumented immigrant. It's few and far between when the government would file appeals.
Is that recent?
Pardon me?
Is that a recent thing you said that they appeal?
Yeah, that's recent.
Under this present administration.
Yeah, that appeal that I saw, it wasn't. I don't think Trump had sworn in as yet when that happened, but it happened after he was elected. That's for sure. But the government appealed the decision, and then we'll see how that plays out in the appellate process. No, as far as rescinding the asylum, like I said, I haven't encountered that happening.
I just heard the president talk about it, that that's one of the agendas to kind of, push that type of, we're not going to give asylum. I don't know how true it is, because like I said, there's a lot of false narratives that are out there to hype people up, and since, like people are hyper scared right now. And I'm aware of your time. I know you're only giving us a small portion, but I want to ask this question. Are there resources? And first, are there resources for people who need help but cannot afford help, one? And two, do you represent people in all different states because it's a federal thing, or are you just New York? That's where your area is, and how can people reach out to you if they do want your services? So both of them, resources, what resources are there, and also how can people reach out to you if they need help for immigration issues?
Yeah, well, there are resources available, yes, for persons who cannot afford a private attorney, immigration attorney. Right off the top of my head, I can tell you of Catholic Charities. They represent indigent clients. A lot of people encounter immigration. Even if you go to immigration court, you can oftentimes go to the clerk's window and get a list of free immigration attorneys. I know federal funding is under threat at this moment, and some of those programs will likely be affected. I don't know specifically which ones, but if you search, you should be able to find a list of free attorneys. As far as my office goes, yes, I represent clients throughout the United States, not just in New York. I have clients in Florida, I have clients in Connecticut, in New Jersey, here in New York. I'm going to Colorado next week to represent someone there. And to reach my office, the telephone number is 718-614-9667. And I am located at 2361 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, Suite 506. You would have to call the office to make an appointment because I only see clients by appointments. You can find me online at kinguslaw.com. I'm on Instagram, King US Immigration. I'm on TikTok, Instagram is King Immigration or King US. I don't even remember. Sorry.
When I find it, send it to us, and then we'll put it up.
Yes.
We'll post it.
Yeah.
No problem. I'm so busy these days. It's hard.
I imagine it'll get busier.
Which direction my head is on at times, but nevertheless, but you can call me to set up any appointment that if you need advice, you need consultation on your options. That's the best way to go about it. And let me say this too. I urge persons who need immigration help to go about seeking that help in a professional and serious manner. All right. Many times people will call and they will be like, I just have a question, right? And they want to ask a question and have it answered in this cookie cutter manner right there. And when it comes to immigration, it is just too precise and too case specific for you to approach such a serious issue with such serious consequences in such a rushed and unprofessional manner. If you want to be taken seriously, if you want to get the best quality, the best advice, do yourself justice, book an appointment with an attorney, have an allotted time set aside for your issue. And in my case, I don't have any time limits on my consultations. I listen to everything. I explore every option. And even if there's nothing that I can do, I ensure you understand why that's the case. Because even if you go elsewhere and someone wants to gas you up, right? At least hey, you know what? Mr. King told me about this and why I shouldn't do it. All right. So do yourself justice and take your matter and your approach to it seriously.
And then finally, what do you think nations, I heard the head of CARICOM say that there needs to be a plan for the Caribbean because there are some numbers in certain places, 899 people, which we know it probably take 5 years to find all those people. But what can the Caribbean do, or what can consulates and nations that are here do to help their citizens? Because I know, for example, in Belize specifically, when we did have the Belize Diaspora Summit, the government came and they helped people with IDs and passports, which help a lot of people because they don't have the ability to go home and retrieve these types of passports and stuff. What in your opinion, and this is just opinion as somebody who's been in this space for many years, what are some of the things you think the Caribbean can do to facilitate this process as this government or this administration becomes very aggressive with removal orders?
Well, in the past, the consulates for different nations would play a role in facilitating removals by issuing travel documents where the detained person did not have a passport that they can travel with. Now, that may sound a bit counterintuitive, you know, because I don't know if you're asking the question to find out how can they stop the removal.
Not stop it, but facilitate.
Yeah, because that really is not going to happen. You know, it's not going to be anything. We saw that attempt recently, and it didn't yield anything. Yeah.
Right.
So that's not going to happen. But I know from practicing all these years, visiting ICE detention centers, and I've heard many clients who've been detained say that ICE detention is like the worst, you know, worse than even doing prison time because of the conditions in these detention centers. And people would rather go home. They would rather be deported than to languish in detention for several months and still end up being deported anyway. So the consulates would play a critical role in facilitating travel documents so that persons can be removed in a speedy manner, you know. And that's off the top of my head, that's the most immediate thing I can think of.
Devon, thank you so much. This is such a big help because the fear is palpable. I mean, people are reaching out and they're asking. Some people are just thinking about coming home because they don't want to face having to live in fear, especially as they get older in life. They really don't want to have to deal with that stuff. So I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been extremely helpful. We're going to take a break and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Rishma a little bit about her days at immigration and some of the processes that she went through. I know that was back in the day, but still, it might at least help people a little bit. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Devon. That was really great information to have.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you and good night.
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 am a true vandalism.
Tell them that we born it.
Release my home, my native land.
Tell them that we born it.
I want you people to understand.
Tell them that we born it.
I am proud to be a Belizean.
Tell them that we born it.
You're bande, you're bande.
Tell them that we born it.
Welcome, we are back. This is Navel String Connections. I'm Bilal Morris. Sorry for my little late entry in the opening of the show. We are talking about immigration issues with this recent draconian measures issued by President Donald Trump. We just had our brother Devon King filling us in. And we will continue for the rest of our show with Rishma, man. You know, Rishma, you have to ease some of the pains out there. people are stressed.
Right.
So Rishma used to be an immigration attorney.
Many years ago.
And Rishma, could you tell us a little bit about, for example, what can people do to stay away from immigration? Even to get under the radar, like what can people do to avoid being on the immigration's radar?
What are you asking me, Aria? What people should do?
Yeah, like for example,
Follow the law?
It's follow the law,
right...
but remember, a lot of people didn't come here on their own. Like their parents brought them.
Exactly. So just a little stint. I did immigration law 10 years ago. So as you can imagine, everything's changed. And a lot of what I did was the family filings. We did some of the business filings. I did a lot of asylums because at that time we had the issue with Venezuela. The U.S. had the issue with Venezuela. So I was actually writing, because most of my law work is writing. I wrote a lot of the asylums for Venezuelans and Argentinians at the time. My advice for what can people do is kind of what Devon said. You have to be informed and take it seriously. So if you know that for example, he's talking about you don't even know that you have a removal order. That's one thing that I would want to find out. If I were under that situation, I would want to find out what my file has. And I would contact an attorney and ask them to do a FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act. And then you know for sure what's in your file. That would be the first thing that I would do. I'm actually thinking of doing it right now for myself, just to see what's out there, because, I have gone through several immigration processes as well. Never a removal order or anything like that, but just to have my file and my record so that I have everything, in my safe in my house somewhere. That could be one thing. So stay informed and definitely take it seriously. And what Devon said without saying is there will be a lot of immigration attorneys that will capitalize on the fear and will capitalize on the people don't have knowledge about what's happening, and they will tell you, yes, we're going to do this. This is how much it costs. This is, people are desperate, so they'll pay.
A lot of corruption.
So that's why Devon is saying, right. And they're fleecing the public. So that's what Devon was saying without saying, is that take it seriously so that someone can sit and explain your options to you, so that if nothing can be done, at least you know that. So when you go to the next person and they tell you, yes, we can do this for you, it'll cost $5,000, and then you end up paying them and nothing happens. So those are the two things I would say. Be informed and then take it seriously, to piggyback off of what Devon said.
So I remember when I worked in foreclosure, a lot of people just hired attorneys to delay the process, knowing that, they're not going to pay their mortgage, but I want my kid to graduate and I want to live in this house. Sometimes people know that they don't have options, but the minute the attorney files now, and I imagine that the caseload is going to quadruple. Mm-hmm. So get in front of
and it buys you time, right, because now you're in a legal proceeding. So for example, back in the day, if you're filing for an asylum and you have your application in, you have now entered with inspection. As Devon was saying, you have your document, you enter with inspection. Now several options open up for you because you've entered with an inspection. So there's things that you can do while you're waiting for that final, adjudication. So if the asylum doesn't get granted, then maybe the marriage to the U.S. citizen will. Or, there's several things that you can do. Go to school.
And I just want to give a warning that marrying a citizen to get cards is illegal, so don't do it if you're not in love.
Exactly.
It's not a serious marriage.
So since we're talking anecdotes, so 10 years ago, I remember taking a call from a person who was saying, I need someone to process my paperwork because I married someone and I'm getting my green card. And so I asked, because I always do, is this a legitimate marriage or are you doing this for documents? And the gentleman was kind enough to tell me that he was just doing it for documents and it wasn't a legitimate marriage. And of course I turned him away because I don't want that smoke. Like I take my law degree very seriously and I'm not putting that at jeopardy. And it was like, okay, thank you for your honesty. And I'm sure he found another lawyer. There's 100,000 of us in Florida.
Yeah, it's legitimate. I mean,
sure. I mean, yeah. Well, people are candid with their attorneys, so they tell them whatever they feel. Right. And I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. I very much appreciate it. But I'm not going to represent him. But I'm sure he's going to find someone who will.
As an immigration lawyer, can they go into cases, files, and overturn citizenships that were done on that basis where it was,
Listen, if they can prove fraud, there's not much that they can't do. But they would have to go, like Devon said, it's their burden. They have to prove that it was fraudulent. And there's so many red flags. So I remember the attorneys I used to work with, they had been in the immigration game like 20, 30 years. They were so much more experienced than I was. And I remember a couple sitting in front of us, and I'm sitting with another attorney. She takes the file, my law partner takes the file, she flips through it, and she turns them away. So we say goodbye and whatnot. And she, as soon as the couple leaves, she turns to me and she goes, "That's not a legitimate marriage." I'm like, what
is a legitimate?
I'm like, hold on. How do you know that? She has done this so long that she can flip through the evidence that they've shown and know that it's fake.
But I have a question. People marry, not everybody marry for love. Some people do marry
you have to marry for love here.
Oh, so for a marriage here in the U.S., it has to be.
I mean, it has to be for love. You can't go to the U.S. government and say we have an arrangement. I mean, it's. You know
what marriages though? It's an arrangement.
Listen, all marriages are technically arrangements, right? All marriages are technically arrangements, but no, in this case, I mean, then I had her dissect what she saw in the file and kind of like teach me the ropes because I didn't know it as much. And the bank account, she was showing me the picture. There were certain things that she identified immediately. And then the danger in not knowing that is that, let's say we represent them. If she knows that right off the bat, that immigration officer knows it right off the bat too. And that's why for example.
So you're drunk in Vegas, you're partying and get drunk in Vegas. And
then let that be the story.
To the 1 minute. And that's a legitimate marriage, right?
Let that be the story. But I'll tell you, and to Devon's point about hiring an attorney, I've represented, and I'll always talk about this couple. This guy tried to add me on Facebook the other day, one of my former clients. I sat in his interview. He married his wife. They had, I don't think they had kids, but they both came from previous marriages. They got divorced. They married each other and whatnot. We prepped them so long for their interview, and I was the attorney that was representing them. So we prepped them for so long. The husband had a tendency, he was Latin, he got very upset, he gets upset easily. So I gave him a little code. When I put my hand on your knee, you shut up, basically, stop talking. And so he was like, okay, got it. So as soon as we stepped into the room, the immigration officer looks at us and she goes, husband and wife separate, puts them in separate rooms. We didn't think they were going to be questioning the wife. But here we go. So I'm like, here we go. I didn't have any representation files on the wife, but I asked the immigration officer, we didn't know they were going to be separated. Can I just represent both of them? Because, whatever. And she said, okay, counselor, that's fine. He starts peppering the husband with these questions. And I thought, oh my gosh. And he's getting all flustered. And he's like, as I told you before, hand on knee. Stop talking. Don't talk to her that way. She's going to fail you. So where he's, I'm butting in as much as I can, answering for him. What he means to say is this. What he means to say is that. I'm just interrupting him. So finally they say, okay, we need to hear how you guys met. So the husband is talking about, oh, we met in Miami-Dade and we did this and we did that. Now switch to the wife. The wife comes in. How did you guys meet? We met in Broward County. We were doing this other thing.
How would that be? That's an
Completely
innocent mistake.
different. And
How would that be?
as soon as she starts talking, hold on, as soon as she starts talking, the immigration attorney looks me in my eyes, and I look her back in her eye, and I'm like, I'm going to make this work for my client. Hands up again. I'm like, well, what she means to say is, this is the first time she actually fell in love with him, but the first time they met was in Miami. I earned my money that day. I tell you, I was making up stuff to the point where she was like, enough, counselor, like, enough. Stop telling them what to say. And lo and behold, they both got approved. And the husband was so appreciative for me. Like, I remember I came home and I told my husband, I'm like, I totally earned my money that day, because I took everything that they wrote, all the questions that they were having them write manually, and I changed them. Because it's not that I was lying. It's not that. I was making them fit. Just like Devon is saying, there's ways and means to do things. So a question of like, when did you first meet your significant other? For him, it was I met in Miami, and that's the first time we physically met. But for the wife, you know how women are more, I guess, more sentimental and emotional. It was the first time she saw him as a potential boyfriend or husband.
In fairness, though, Rishma, only Miami people know the difference between Broward and Dade.
Well, this immigration officer certainly does. No, they told completely different stories. My heart dropped when she started talking. Like, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to make this work? And every subsequent question, it was like, did you guys go on vacation out of the country? No, we did not. She pulls out a manifest of when they went to a cruise in the Bahamas. I mean, this immigration officer had absolutely everything.
Really?
So now I have to explain to the immigration officer, well, for them, the Bahamas is not really out of the country because it's a weekend cruise. I was coming up with quite like answers like crazy. So yeah. Please hire an attorney to help you.
These people your clients don't understand the language, that the legal aspect has a language, and that's where you came in. You're just making sure the judge understand that this is the language that they're trying to say.
Yeah, this is what they really meant to say.
They can't speak the legal language. That was your role as the lawyer to make sure that the language...
No, it was just that one interview. And then there's issues too when there is an actual language barrier, because for example, I tried to bring a translator for, I think it was a Haitian couple, and the immigration officer didn't want to take my translator. They wanted to use a translation service that they had to call.
Oh, okay. Because I could see why, though. Because they don't want somebody to be fixing the language. They want somebody that is...
other immigration attorneys took my translator. Okay. Like, because, you would... Anyway, she just wanted to use a service. And the service... horrible. It was so horrible to the point that I was rolling my eyes and huffing and puffing in the back. And it came to a point where she was like, enough, counselor, go sit in the back. And she sent me to the back of the room. I was so mad. But it was so bad. But
that's a barrier that is across the board, because as a teacher, I remember
my God, it was terrible.
These Russian kids running from the Ukraine war, I teach a lot of them. And they can't talk a word of English. You have to tell them, Google Translate,
Man, we tried. And this one was kind of like, there was a huge age difference with the husband and the wife. Yeah. So it was like, immediately they know what's red flagged or not. So for example, with my personal experience, my husband.
If a woman wants to go bring her 20-year-old and she is 50.
No, but they got approved. Approved because the immigration officer explained to me, well, yeah, they knew each other in their home country. And it was, it wasn't like, they just knew each other for a very long time. They just happened to have an age gap. But there's certain things that will pique a little bit of an interest.
Immigration, I never use an attorney. I filed myself. I went through their checklist because they do give me a checklist. Mm-hmm. And they only
but you guys don't have red flags, though. You guys, no, seriously, you guys wouldn't have the red flag that would
because he only asked me one question. He's like, is this Chris? That was literally his only question he asked me. And him and Sean start talking about the Navy.
Right, because you guys had a child already. Like, there's not
Right.
many fraudsters that will just have a child just to. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that that's really taking it a bit too far.
I wonder though, and I know I'm belaboring this point because we can talk about other aspects of immigration, but I feel like marriage is evolving. And where you're talking about, for example, there was a prenup with Janet Jackson, where
Hmm.
if she had to have a kid and she would get so much money in the divorce, and so she had the kid. That's what I'm saying, that even like marriages are so dynamic today, uh,
Yeah,
and they're so self-interested. A lot of it is self-interest.
yeah.
It's not really about falling in love and running away. Some people are doing it, and that's what I'm saying. What is the definition of marriage? I mean, is the immigration still utilizing? You said yes, that they're still
I mean,
utilizing.
there is an element of like actual human emotion that has to go into the marriage, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying,
Okay.
right? So, like, you can't go and present as an attorney. I wouldn't go and present a case of my clients have an arrangement,
But what about
and
cultures that have arranged marriages? Does immigration accept those?
yeah, because again, there's no other red flags. So the red flags I'm talking about is your intention to defraud the government,
Okay, so
right?
just get married, divorce
An
afterwards
intent,
because
yeah.
you want
Right.
it.
So a
Intent
red
to
flag would
defraud.
be, and we've actually had this where you have to ask for prior divorce settlements with divorce decrees and stuff like that. There's a woman who was getting divorced every 4 years. Duh, what was she doing? She was selling her,
And
marriage.
just an
She was
FYI, I
getting
have a
paid,
cousin that
right?
fell in love 8 times and got married. So I'm just saying it. It's
But was she sponsoring her spouses the
no,
entire time?
no, she was not. But I'm
Exactly.
just saying that
Exactly. So that's
marriage is so
allowable if
dynamic. Okay.
that's allowable if you're not going through the immigration process for every one of these spouses that you happen to then
So she
marry
just can't
and
like
divorce.
foreigners. Like you can't just be
She
like,
just can't, like, no,
okay,
don't like, or like foreigners who are already here. Like,
yeah.
Saying that
don't do
though,
that.
Petitions and
saying all that though, Rishma, I want to take it to another level.
Yes,
Saying
tell
all
me.
that, would you say as an immigration attorney, a lawyer,
I'm not an immigration attorney
you're
anymore.
not, you're what,
Prior.
just a lawyer,
Corporate
right?
and business, yes.
Business. But understanding immigration law anyway as a lawyer yourself, right? Would you
Hmm.
say that with all of these types that we are talking about here, where people, like you say, this was, do you think that the system was broken? You would think that the American immigration system is broken.
it's very broken.
Broken.
I think that for the most part, it catches people who shouldn't be caught and
And
allows other people to just, I just don't know how they do it.
Do you think people
It
took
is,
advantage of these things, though? I
it
mean,
is,
it
yeah,
was
and people
really
take advantage all the time. I mean,
totally.
I'm sure
Yeah.
we all know people who got married for money. I mean, we all do,
I
but
don't.
you don't, okay, I know a couple of
But
people who
it
have.
appears like it is as illegal as crossing the border on through a river. You would think, and coming into the country illegal. When you sort
Yeah.
of juxtapose it to it and say that they're both part of why the American immigration system is broken.
I mean,
Well,
it's so robust, and there's so many different types of programs. Like, the bigness of it all. And I talk to ARIA all the time about, like, the problem in Belize is too big, and I feel like immigration is too big as well for the U.S. Even now, when we watch the news and just pivot into the corporate, Elon Musk wants to remove the caps on H-1B visas, work visas. Now, there's a cap for a reason, the amount of people that can come in on those visas, but now he wants to remove it because he wants people to work on SpaceX and Starlink and all these other things. So
and the
it's just,
Republicans are very upset over that. So that's going to be interesting. They're
yeah,
very,
because he's going to bring in all the Indians and Chinese because
yeah.
those are the tech countries, right? So
Some
I don't know. I don't
Republicans
know.
feel like if that happens, then the whole immigration issue, and I just want to say how dynamic it is. One family could have so many different categories in their family, and I could start with my own family. In my family, which is a blended family, you have people who are born in the US, you have people who are born in Belize, you have US citizens, and it's extremely dynamic. Like no family these days, it's all Americans. Maybe in the middle America or maybe in parts of America, but a lot of family like this girl that I work with. One, her daughter's married a Colombian guy, and the other daughter, I can't remember what other country. But that's what I'm saying. It's so dynamic now that to target people, it's going to be tough because a lot of people, like my issue with the administration, government period, and you could pick a country or whatever, things sound good when you're talking to people. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But America is such a big country. It's 300 million people plus. Then you have 50 states that operate like 50 different countries.
Yeah.
So when I am listening to Belize News, sometimes I feel like they don't do the research sometimes to understand. To find 900 Belizeans, it might say, oh, 900. Do you know what, like, immigration would have to go find 900 people when people move a lot? Some people might be homeless. They're in a different state. And that is why, for example, Trump is saying, I want 1,000 people per day to be deported. It's unrealistic. For him to even try to pull that policy off, he has to greatly increase the budget for immigration. And then you have to go get all these enforcement officers. Then you have to go locate people. And that's what I'm saying. Yes, you might get the Belizeans who are in prison and who are in jail. Those are always going to be the easiest people to deport. Yeah. But the people who are running around, unless you get into trouble or something happen, it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
And I think that it's also very important to understand the difference between rhetoric and execution of a policy. So I feel like I try to be very measured every time something else comes out, because the last administration, we were jumping at every single thing that was happening. So this administration, and it's never good for your mental health to do that. So for this administration, I try to be more measured in what I hear. Because, for example, as soon as I heard about the ending birthright citizenship, my initial reaction was like, that's unconstitutional. Yeah. And I kept it moving, unconstitutional.
It's just for...
And of course, it's just rhetoric for certain people to say, yeah, let's do that. Let's get rid of the immigrant. It's just you have to look at the motive behind why people do things. So as soon as I heard that, and I thought, well, that's unconstitutional. It's not going to fly. And I kept it moving. It got challenged by the court. The judge is like, this is ridiculous. This is the most clear judgment I've ever had to pass down. It's settled law. It's never going to happen. And just trust in the judiciary and keep it moving.
And
so I'm not saying there's not an impact for people. The government
didn't even appeal it. So
how can they appeal it?
But that's what I'm saying. They didn't even appeal it.
They couldn't appeal it. It was completely unconstitutional. So there is a difference between hearing what someone wants to propose, and I hate to say it this way because it makes it so simplified. It's like when my kids come to me and they throw out a million things that they want to do, and I have to just be like, no, and knock it down or take it through a process. Like, how is that possible? Tell me how you're going to work on that. And then they go through it and realize, oh, wait, no, I can't do that. Yeah. I feel like the same thing is happening here. It's like there's a lot being said. And yes, it is extremely scary because things are being done as well. You see the raids and everything. But like ARIA said, like if you think about the size of what's happening and you think about the actual execution of it, it becomes impractical. So don't get caught up in the bluster and the rhetoric and just attack the actual issue as it happens. That would be that's my take on what's happening here and in Belize too.
Oh, no, you're right.
I mean, a large amount of people are so ignorant. You talk about having to know, which is a good thing. You as a lawyer yourself, or ARIA and myself, we can make sense out of nonsense. But you're talking about a classroom full of 25 students staring you in your face, have no knowledge of what's going on. Their parents can't explain to them because they themselves don't know what to do.
Right.
Schools not doing no kind of popular education because all they're saying, well, we are not going to bring no ICE in here. But that's just lip service.
And that's why the Bilal again.
That population that's where I think that out of that 1,000 that ARIA is saying that he says he wants to deport, he's 1% right because he knows that the people are ignorant and that so many people are going to get caught up in it because of the ignorance.
Well, isn't that every country throughout
and Devon King to explain to them?
Isn't that the case for every country throughout the ages? I mean, yes. You work on the ignorance of people to be able to do your policy. And I tell my husband all the time, every time I see that there's like a cluster of policy being thrown that some are just extremely ridiculous, I think about, okay, what's being passed? While we're in
between the legislation,
what's actually being passed while we're here cutting up about birthright citizenship and raids and whatnot? And though, yes, raids are actually happening, but while we're doing all this, what's actually being passed in the background? What is it that, all these Senate confirmation hearings, I don't know if you guys watch them, but I watch them from time to time. These are the people who are going to be leading the country in these like critical industries. That's what's happening in the background while we're fighting up about,
But you know what, Rishma? We're just 10 days in and I'm exhausted. We're 10 days in. We're 10 days
It's still January, people. It's still January.
Yeah. Hey, look.
The longest month in the history of months. It's not even
the longest 10 days, no?
Another day in January.
We still have
the longest
another
10
day.
days in her life.
Oh my God.
This January is like 10 years.
That to me, that's how the pandemic was. It was the longest year.
The longest 10 days in your life.
5 years went like that.
Yeah.
Hey, but you simply, Rishma and ARIA, you're talking about a drug dealer getting to be extradited to the United States, right? And you don't even understand what's due process of law.
Yeah.
Like, what is that, right?
That's why
conspiracy to supply. Conspiracy to supply.
Oh,
that's a policy. Now these people are running back and forth. Now you have a whole new thing now. Immigration deportation. Right? You're not caught with no drugs now. You're caught with just being in our country legally. You don't know your rights, even due process of law. What is that? Or your conspiracy to enter the United States illegally.
You know why?
A lot of times you just don't say anything.
A month from today,
as Devon King was saying, right? Yeah,
half those deportees are going to be right back in the United States, okay? Because they have a job, they have businesses, and they're already living under the shadows. So to come back in is not going to be a big deal for them, and that's why it becomes a policy that's not filled with a solution. The only way I feel like if they're serious...
Like the war on drugs, right, ARIA?
Yeah.
America is losing it.
The only way that you're going to win this is if you go after the corporations and farms that are hiring them and make the fines so oppressive that it becomes a deterrent. But that's not going to happen because
they won't.
Those are the donors. So
exactly,
it's like it's a circle. And I think as somebody who believes in human rights, I find immigration to be just a new form of slavery for a lot of people. They're scaring them because when they were talking about it on radio today in the US, a lot of these immigrants, if the guy doesn't want to pay him on Friday or withhold his salary, he doesn't have or doesn't feel like he can go and complain.
Right.
And I'll tell you that's what I do like about Catholic ministry.
Charities. Yeah, charities.
They have actually been doing a wonderful job with trying to assist people to know their rights. They're big here in Florida. I know I volunteered for them one time. And they feed people too. They do a lot that, to me, that's what churches should be doing. Yeah. But all I'm saying is that if we are human rights activists and if we believe in human rights, this is not an issue with immigrants. This is a corporate versus people who have no voice issue. And yeah, they changed it to immigrants, but once upon a time it was slavery or whatever descriptor they use to take advantage of people. These people, for the most part, are not going to run for election. They're not taking away jobs. Most of them hold their head down. They're very humble people, you know, and the reality is that if somebody, to me, if America is a country of human rights and civil rights, Americans cannot sit back and just allow people to be taken advantage of. And one of the things I just want to say before we go, Belizeans or some Belizeans are celebrating people getting deported. But I will say this, a lot of Belizeans are here. They might not have their papers, but they're providing for their families in Belize. If you take away that from them, there's a lot of families that are going to fall below the poverty line and they won't have a safe
Absolutely.
net.
That's one of the most ridiculous things. I don't understand how you would want to celebrate into the demise of your own people.
But
It
more
just
than
brings
that,
me
if
back.
Belizeans come
It just
home,
brings me back, Aria, in terms of how Belizeans at home look at the Belizean diaspora. Another just,
Another
but
huge
just
topic.
Bilal,
silly,
if they
stupid
go home,
behavior. Why would
Belizeans
you
that
want to? Why would you want to do that?
if
You
they
know?
go home, they're going to take Belizeans at home jobs because Belizeans here are hustling. They know to get up at 5 in the morning. They know how to go work all hours and they know how to do a lot of stuff.
Again, the
So
disunity amongst the people,
it's sad though
those
because
at home and those abroad.
at the end of the day, when it comes to hurricanes and disasters and medical help, Belizeans abroad has done a lot. Even the ones who are not here legally have
But
been
Ari, you
giving
know
back
how
to
hard
their
it is for them to accept that. You know the
yeah,
arguments that has been waged by us here in the diaspora to drive that point home,
right.
and it still didn't go home. It's still, and
Well, is
now
it
you have another thing that you say they're laughing and they're celebrating.
is
It's
this a
just
good time
any
to?
other country hears that they would like, what's wrong with these people? I
Yeah.
mean, they don't have no unity.
Listen, my suggestion to Belizeans who don't have papers, my suggestion is Belize not a cost. Belize right now economy is in boom. The tourism industry is growing leaps and bounds. While a lot of Belizeans have skill sets, for example, they know how to build, they know how to do a lot of stuff, that's going to be beneficial to the country of Belize. I keep the tell Belizeans on a buy on a piece of land while it's still affordable.
But thank good for the diaspora summit. A lot of them got their piece of land.
Yeah, a lot, but
Well,
then that was 500. We the talk about 100,000 Belizeans.
I was
Yeah.
talking to people there in that lands department at the summit who said that, man, I want to go home, but if I go home, I can't come back. I want to get this piece of land so I could build something.
Well,
And I
start
going
doing
home. I
that.
tired of this
Then
abstract
do
live
that.
out here under the shadows. I'm
And the
tired.
reason I tell people to
Yeah.
do that is because if ICE does pick you up and you're on a removal order, then I'll give you the opportunity for go pack up your house. Then I'll give you the opportunity for go sell your car.
Big preparation. Yeah, a preparation should have been made
You should
a
start
long
making
time in terms
preparations.
of, yes, yes.
And if you
You
can't
can't say
become
that in the diaspora, those of us legal citizen green card holders or legal, that the warning was not made decades ago by many Belizean governments, past and present. We want to prepare yourself that if anything crazy happens over there, home is where they will not turn you back, right? Home is safe. A lot of us did not listen to it. We procrastinated. We, as
never
well as
too
we
late.
take care of our
It's never
legal
too late.
aspects in the United States, we just did not do anything. We thought it was a joke.
Sell the Birkin bag, sell it to the Cadillac, buy one lease small car, and on a start to build, on a start to invest, in the future. Because at the end of the day, I've always said, when you are in a situation where you do not have rights and you do not have a say, you become vulnerable to that system. And unfortunately, the same feelings that Belizeans have with the immigrants are the same feelings that Americans have with immigrants. And we have to be realistic about it. We have to
Exactly.
realize that, you come to somebody else's country and eventually the whole idea of generosity fades away as the numbers keep growing. So those are just some of the realities that we have to face and be honest about in immigration, that people just not like that all immigrants are coming in. And even though it's not necessarily true, the perception is they get free land, they get free food, they get free this. Well, even if that's not true, but the politicians drive these type of rhetoric for votes. And when when you don't have a say, now you can potentially become a target of somebody's agenda. So all I'm saying, if you can legalize yourself, go talk to an attorney. If you have kids who are 21 years old, that time for talk to an attorney. If you are on a removal order, remove yourself. Not make somebody come pick you up. That's just my opinion.
Or still talk to an attorney because you might have options too.
Right. You might fall within that exception that he said. Talk to an attorney, like take your money. And if you can't afford an attorney, go to Catholic charities. Go to one of these centers that offer free, and it's actual attorneys that go into these centers and give free legal advice.
There's a lot of legal aids around,
The other thing is reach out to your consulate and try get your documents so that you can travel back home. And like he said, you don't want to be caught up in detention for months. You could just say, listen, just send me home. Those are
some of us might end up all the way to Guantanamo Bay.
Right. No, I think that for countries that they cannot deport to.
Who knows? Who knows how far he will go?
I wanna just say one thing before you guys leave. Stay tuned for the second annual Belize Diaspora Summit in the summer of 2025. We'll
more needed than ever now.
We'll have more details.
We're in the era of Trump.
So yes, this is gonna
for 2 years.
At least for another 2 years.
Than ever now. Big up to the Belize Diaspora Summit because we did an excellent job last year in terms of bringing immigration. You know, that was right on time on land. So I really talk about. Don't feel like you're called for get a piece of land, and Belizeans took advantage of that. Again, the Belize Diaspora Summit was a vision. It was and made a big impact. What the diaspora did.
We have more things that we're working on right now for bigger and better.
So with that being said, Rishma, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
I think this is an extremely very important conversation. I'll be honest with you, you should share it with your family and friends. And share it because sometimes people don't share what their immigration issues are. But share it because as a Belizean community, we really should start collaborating with each other, and we really should look out for each other because technically that's how you survive this type of administration.
And we have to know our rights as an immigrant community. You have to know our rights.
Yeah, and we should post Devon's website on the Navel String Connections as well, so that people can know how to get in contact with him.
I will. I'll share his website so that if you're interested in legal advice to set up a consultation, honestly, you really should consider it because especially if you're invested in America, and invested, I mean, you have a car, you have a house, because, you know, in America, you could own everything and you're still not legal because they allow that. So you want to protect your assets, you want to protect your investments, and it's time, like he said, to get serious. We're in a serious time. Everything is not a joke, and please respect people. Like, you know, I've heard stories where people say, oh, I'm going to report this one, I report that one there. You know, this are the time for make you have one little bit of humanity for people. Because I believe in a karma. You do something good for people, it comes back to you. And similarly, negativity produces more. So with that being said, thank you again. Thank you, Devon King, for joining us, Guyanese American attorney, Rishma, Guyanese Belizean / American attorney. And we want to thank XTV Harlan, who is our engineer, for always like hitting it on the ball. And Bilal, of course. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I am a true born Belizean. Belize my home, my native land. I want you people to understand. I am proud to be a Belizean.